99X. It's the Morning X. It's Barnes and Leslie. Crash is here hanging out with us. And today is September 11th, 2024. That means different things to different people. This is a day I know I'll never forget as a broadcaster.
Exactly. It was a somber day.
It's probably the biggest thing that when I meet listeners in the wild, come up and ask or talk about is that, hey, we were listening to you all that day.
Yeah.
And here's what I remember. What does that make you feel like when people do bring that up to you out in the wild, Leslie?
Well, I think because the people were searching for comfort, and we ended up staying on the air almost all day, if you remember, because it was happening in real time while we were on the air.
Yep.
Yeah, the thing that I remember most is our old studio. There were a bunch of TVs over your and Jimmy's head.
Yes.
And so I was facing the TVs, and you guys were facing me, the way the setup in the studio, and same for you, Crash. And I remember being on the air and seeing the first plane hit and thinking, that was weird. You know, like at that point, no audio. I just see that happen.
Yes.
And smoke. And I thought, what was that? That was some sort of...
And we're like, well, how did that happen?
Could that have been an accident in New York? Like, you know, someone learning to fly, like... And then, a few minutes later, the second one, and I think we were on the air when the second one hit. Was that right, Crash?
Yeah, we were, because that's when Melissa Carter was doing news, and her and I shared an office. So when the first one hit, we thought it was like a glider or something small, and then all of a sudden the second one hit, and that's when we both ran back in. And you talk about what were you feeling? That's when the second one hit, you knew something was immediately wrong, and I just felt numb, like I couldn't breathe for a couple seconds.
Numb.
Yeah.
Numb. That is a perfect way. I'm driving home from there. I think Jimmy was off that day.
Jimmy was off.
Yes, he was. He was suspended. Suspended.
That's right. He was suspended.
It was strange for him to be off, but it was like it was like right after 8 a.m., if you remember.
Yeah. Like 8:23, I think, was the first, something like that.
Okay.
And we got somebody on the phone from New York. Wasn't it a friend of mine or something that we got on the phone?
I feel like describing the scene-ish around that area.
Yes.
And then for all the years to come right after that, you would go to New York, and it was very just numb is a great way to put how you feel when you see the area and when you saw those big holes in the ground from where the buildings used to be.
And if you remember, Barnes, we had just come back from New York because we were broadcasting from New York for the VMAs. So several days later, this happened.
So there's a whole subculture going on that you may or may not know about, and it's pretty gross. And I'm sharing it with you right now only for awareness. So I hope that someone doesn't just turn on the radio and think, what the hell are they doing? I want to be very clear. What I'm about to air, I don't endorse it, and you shouldn't either. There's a whole thing going on with specifically Gen Z, and that's people born between 97 and 2012, if I remember exactly, that don't take it very seriously. Not everyone, but there are pages and pages of 9/11 memes, and they think it's funny.
Jeez.
Which I don't understand. I've seen these and I'm like, what kind of life do you lead?
Here's one with George Bush, and the audio alone will tell you like what's happening.
To do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
I don't need to explain.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
That's just an example.
I don't understand why people are saying, because I've read some of the comments and people saying that it's healthy to joke about a tragedy, that it's a coping mechanism.
How is that healthy? How? Like, how could that even be the rationale? Here's a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers that has no shortage of this type of stuff out there. His name is Jay Schlatt.
Mm-hmm.
I see the lack of towers, and it just upsets me because I want them to be there, right?
Me too.
We all want them to be there. So I've invented this. It's a time machine. You get in, you go back to 2001, and you watch it again.
No!
You watch that again.
As we all know, there's a strict lack of towers. And as you can see in my drawing, the amount of towers as shown in the bar graph has been going down consistently. So I invented the remote. Simply just, you can take control over the TV and turn it right off. You don't got to see lack of tower. You won't even see anything. You'll see a black screen.
You know, every time I turn on TV, I don't see any towers there. So I suggested that, you know, we rebuild, right?
Boo.
No, come on. And not a plane in sight.
What's that?
How is that funny?
Yeah, it's not.
It's not. I don't think you can ever make light of like one of the darkest thing that's ever happened.
Well, what's interesting is some people say you can. There's this expert, George Bonanno, who's a professor of clinical psychology. He said that most people recover from the shock of traumatic events quicker than anticipated, which may explain the increasing prevalence of humor surrounding 9/11.
Well, maybe people are desensitized, but I have to say, like, I don't think there is a world in which we live in to make any sort of jokes about 9/11. Crash, do you agree?
No, I absolutely agree 100%. And I get the old, you know, tragedy and comedy. And I remember when the late night shows were just starting to come back on the air after a week or so. And they were like, we have to laugh. We have to be, you know, I get that. But you don't see any of our generation making any kind of fun of like Pearl Harbor or something like that.
No.
I mean, it's just those times in history where you obviously remember and reflect, but you leave them alone with comedic relief. I mean, that's no.
Are they not teaching this in history in school? Like, these people would be around 20 years old-ish.
Yeah.
Predominantly this group.
They're disconnected from it all.
Well, there's another thing called the benign violation theory, which was proposed by these two researchers, Peter McGraw and Caleb Warren, that further supports suggesting that humor about controversial events becomes more acceptable as the immediacy of the trauma fades. But, in my opinion, this is a trauma that reached so far and so wide with so much loss of life that you never saw late night shows joke about it.
Ever.
I can't think of one 9/11 joke that ever, even now, because you just don't do it.
Maybe we're just different because, you know, they're saying it's a coping mechanism, but I've never used humor as a coping mechanism for a tragedy.
Funny you mention that. Here's another YouTuber talking about just that.
Maybe there's something more to it than that. Maybe this 9/11 marked something, a turning point in the cultural consciousness. Maybe it's part of what precipitated a world that led our generation to weaponize irony, drink it and drown in it until it corroded our generational soul. And maybe it's because making those deaths meaningless is a mercy compared to acknowledging the real effect that they had on us. Oh wait, no, it's actually because I'm too young to remember it and I don't understand its consequences. Bye!
Wow. So, you know, maybe that's a little cue to, if you have kids in that range, maybe just have an innocent conversation with them.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, especially kids, you know what, especially being on the heels of another mass shooting right here in our own backyard. Let's see how that generation handles that. How are you going to handle the humor when you're talking about classmates that have been killed? It's the same thing with 9/11 and every other tragedy in history.
Thank you, Crash. Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah, it's awful stuff. So we remember on this day how all lives were changed. This is the original. It is 99X.